get it. We do not need a laptop, but a clicker would be really nice if you have time to get it. The computer is really far away from the screen, and so I'm hoping. Okay. Okay. Just follow down the hallway until you see the chairs. All right, bye. Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Keep going right in the corner, right past the water fountain. Come on.
Hi.
Hey, Rebecca.
Hey, hon.
Up here?
You got 1:30.
Well, I mean, the computer is there, the screen is there, everybody's gonna be sitting in there.
Just-
So I'm thinking what we do is we just take.
Trying to
turns
do-
with the slides.
You may wanna just let everyone know at the beginning,
And then,
Yeah.
that you will be stepping out,
I finished it when,
especially your
and
vice
there's no,
chair.
even if we used a mouse, we'd have to use it like right here.
What are you stepping out for? Funeral
I
ceremony.
would
do
tell
they
you.
have, do they have, I can't.
Deputy, just the people, so it's.
Yeah.
It's the,
But
yeah,
I told
J.E.
you.
Reynolds.
Yeah.
Lord wanted it.
you know, that's right.
Hmm.
I have not asked anyone to do the invocation and pledge, it completely slipped my mind.
I don't know.
So, wait,
Is that a
do you
clicker?
mind doing the
I think it
pledge?
is, actually.
Is this,
Thank you.
is this a meeting?
Special call meeting.
Red light works.
You don't want the black.
This is what
one.
y'all
So
wanted.
you're trying to
You
go
got
back.
what you
need to
wanted.
find out when you do this, when you- because something
I
like
didn't,
that.
I wasn't even, I was thinking
Is there
this
any-
was,
It doesn't have a base here, does it?
See, that
RFQ kind of just that.
It didn't though.
It
Okay.
is a
If it
special
works,
call
there's no,
meeting, since the board,
Okay,
all
so
the
we have
board
a board.
members will be
We
here
don't
with the
make
exception
it
of
do
Jet
it
Ed.
unless there's a.
And that's the only thing on our agenda then, are the interviews, so just FYI,
Okay,
that's it.
okay.
We'll, go through the invocation pledge, adopt the agenda, and then it'll be
I don't know.
Gresham Smith.
Don't
Okay.
ask me, I'm confused.
I better be somebody over to help me.
Charlie, is it displaying off that?
Can you step out?
So this is our main computer,
I
and
think
then
this
it
will just
shows everywhere for our
halfway through,
members.
they'll
and
just
for
keep
the
right on
audience.
So
briefing.
there are like three versions.
Do whatever they're doing.
What time you gotta leave?
You don't.
1:30, 1:30 to 2.
Let me just close the
So it's all supposed to be in the first,
I don't know what's going on.
you know.
I'll reopen it.
So
They
you
have an
know
hour.
where, this appears, remember,
this is
my
all.
clicker is in my car, which is not here.
All right, let me go see.
You know where the other end of
Tell
this
him
is,
I'm here.
Bluetooth, because this appears to be a clicker, because that's usually making the screen go blank.
Let me see if our IT guy's here.
I bet
and,
you would be, because it's got some other end to this.
Okay,
some other
all
end.
right, let's see.
So they're gonna be,
It's gonna be a full board, we're gonna be looking there, plus there's gonna be people out here, and she said that there was previously like an evaluation committee that sat here. Of course, they got our back to us, so we'll have to just wait people.
I'm just gonna, so
Are
can,
you good with that?
we have a,
Oh, great.
well,
We have a-
we have one side.
Yeah,
So
we're missing the important side.
We're gonna find the side that connects to this, so we can.
Oh, okay.
Now, so it's still lower than, but not, it's
truck if you don't have one.
No, I do, yeah.
She brought my reading glasses, I didn't bring the pen.
That's okay.
Let's see what's showing on their screen. Yeah, that's the correct thing.
There's no,
I know you're at lunch. I am so sorry.
do you have it with you or?
Yeah,
We're
not
probably
part of a clicker.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So here's the plan.
Clicker is? You know
Um,
anything about that?
Here's the plan. Cameron, if you'll be,
Yeah.
or initially drive these lines, so
Looks like it.
and then Randy, right? And then Hal. So you
Let me see what.
you're handing out for me.
Sure, if I'm behind, just tell me if I'm missing.
I'll just, yeah, I'll,
Yeah, sorry.
yeah.
No, you're okay. Yeah, it's missing.
And then when we get to your part,
Yeah, look and see if it's sticking out the side.
then you have to do that.
Is it right there?
So what I'll do
On
is
the side?
I'll put that on our
It looks like a USB drive, he said. So it should be in the computer.
So he thinks, and this is our, jack of all trades.
Mhm.
Kind of faux, they're supposed to be here. But they're supposed to be here.
How you doing? Hello. Hello. No, they don't see it, right? He's looking at it again, just to.
Is it really long? Is it, it's not right here by chance? It's not like that.
Very
big, is
well
it?
could be.
Charlie,
Is that?
does it say Kingston?
Bingo.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay, perfect. Let me call
Charlie, you sure you don't need the other chair?
I'm sorry.
No, you should,
So what
Too
do
much going on.
you don't
Plug
need
it
it.
into there and it should.
If you
plug
want us, I'll
in
come.
theory.
I'll sit out there. I just wanna
Thank
make
you.
sure.
So-
I'm gonna let him.
You're driving, Rebecca, yeah. There's always a, this is, they gotta be set up for, I mean, I didn't know how they had a big chamber like this, this is great.
Okay, so
All right.
we should,
Yeah, it was in the toolbox.
I guess we're depending on where everybody's sitting, because I don't know how back
Sorry.
people are sitting out here.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out.
I'm gonna go get a box of pens,
I'm gonna walk.
cause you may not be the only
Hi,
one.
again.
Brandon, good to see you.
I hope we get some more people.
How you doing,
showing up.
Cam Traylor.
Cam, Brandon Lewis, nice to meet you, Brandon.
After all that.
Yeah.
What happened?
So, you're
I'm sure we will.
lovely and.
Miss Fanny said she's gonna be a little late.
Oh, me?
Every, yes.
Okay, yes.
Everything, basically,
Everything,
okay.
Beekeeping,
Cam-
engineering, all the
yes.
above. All right,
Goats.
cool.
Milk and goats.
Cameron basically just does all the work and makes me look good. So,
Okay,
yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah.
Good to have somebody like that.
Yeah.
As long as they don't mind.
I don't really know what I used to do without it, so.
Yeah.
Crush it.
Yeah, so sitting there and maybe make him walk.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, depending on where people are sitting, I may just kind of roam like this. So,
Yeah,
dance the floor.
dancing.
Work it. Okay.
Did you stop? This is gonna be tight, back-to-back hour meetings for them.
It's like every day it seems.
Really?
All right, yeah. Yeah, sometimes it's, all day.
Hey,
Hey, how you doing, Charlie? Hey, do I need to give you the, or did I give you the, roster for the last, GUCC meeting?
I haven't seen it.
Do you need it? Yeah,
Which is
probably,
fine.
okay. For record, okay, I'll send it to you.
I don't think, oh, I'm sorry, Cheryl.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, how are you?
Cheryl Matlock.
Cam Traylor.
Nice to meet
Nice
you.
to meet you.
Hi, Scott. Rebecca Lindsey.
I just can't sanitize, so y'all are having.
Hey.
You want blue instead of black? Don't matter.
You too.
Yeah.
How you doing, sir? Cam Traylor. Joseph Johnson. Nice to meet
Yeah.
you. Nice to meet you.
You ready?
Good.
Looking sharp.
Thank you.
What's up, man? How you doing?
Good.
Jeff's not gonna be here, so I squeezed Wanda in.
All right.
She'll be excited.
Yeah, why's Jeff not
Yeah,
here?
he
Jeff had,
dressed
prior
himself nice
engagement.
and looked like his normal self for about a minute, but, yeah,
What happens when we have?
Yeah, he was.
yeah, yeah.
Those were his
Good.
statements, exactly.
Hey, Wade?
Hey, man, you doing all right?
Yeah, pretty good.
You gotta step out at 1:30. Funeral.
I saw that, I was on the door at 1:30. Wrapping up early. Okay.
I don't know, that means they're gonna turn over to me, which means we're all in trouble.
Oh, right.
Better not be.
What?
You better not be.
I need to get her closer to me, so when we have to do this shift.
Oh, Cheryl, do you mind delivering the invocation?
Sure.
Sorry, to spring it on you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't
He's gotta
arrange
step
that.
out at 1:30
Why?
for the funeral,
Oh, okay.
which means I have to start running.
Well, it's
Which I
not
need
the-
someone to come over here
It's
and
not the
elbow me
funeral, it's like a, just a,
the service.
it's a
Memorial service?
kind of, for people who can't attend the funeral tomorrow, they're gonna meet on the courthouse steps
Oh, okay.
and just
Oh,
do
for
a
the
little, yeah.
deputy thing? We may be talking, we may be listening then.
Yeah. Mhm.
Joseph will probably be running it, but yeah, I can, I'll flag you down if it's wrong.
Yeah,
She's not sitting close enough to smack you.
yeah, please.
Will he be gone long? I mean, is he coming back?
Yeah, it's from 1:30 to 2.
Okay.
Not that I'm, upset, he's like putting me on the spot or anything.
The only thing I think that you'd have to do is just say thank you.
Okay.
That's all looking at the time thing. And if he's not back at 2, you may have to turn it over to Joseph and let him introduce the next group.
If you'll have a seat at the table.
Hey, good. David Lucky.
Try and keep everyone together.
Good afternoon.
How you doing?
I'm well, thank you. I hope you are.
I am.
This is Friday, I don't really wanna.
You're telling me.
I have a 16-year-old's birthday party going on in my backyard at 6 o'clock.
How about that?
Are you ready
Come up with,
for it?
I hope,
with a
cause
question.
I'm not gonna have any time when it's finished here.
Yeah,
They definitely does days. Some of the questions,
Yeah, we have a pool, so
it's been like days.
his is in August. We can have swim parties in August. The other two are in September. We don't get to do them because it's cold.
Potentially time at the end for
I will say it's cold. It's too cool to swim.
cooler. Yeah. So, some of the questions, yeah, I mean, I think we definitely have answers for all of them. We're comfortable. It's a lot of content to cover. So, we're gonna go, a little fast. Not crazy, but we stand toes.
That's it?
Yeah.
Do the best answering as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
That'll work.
Got the steel branch started,
All right.
Brandon?
What's that?
The steel branch started, they get the auger going?
Yeah, yesterday was.
Did they?
So that's all.
Looks like it's gonna work.
Yeah, no.
Well, I hope it's gonna
Yeah.
enable us to,
This is for the.
convey less water.
Your residents.
So they can, or holding
How,
power,
I guess it's the commission.
get a more consistent feed source to the screw
What do
press.
you mean?
Right.
And that's the goal.
Good morning.
We'll see. It's pretty big stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm dealing with Mike on some of the float issues, not triggering and stuff.
Yeah, they attach it to a PVC pipe, I think, kind of a.
Well, they did that, and they had to go throw a sump pump in to stir it up.
Yeah, I think that was my
still, if nobody else comes, nothing's gonna happen. With no quorum.
Can you see the steam?
Okay.
Sure, sure.
Yes, I believe, I can't help. Do you have, hammer?
Fanny said she's coming, she's just gonna be a bit late.
Who?
Fanny. Well, so, what about?
Madam Attorney? All right, if we end up with 5 of us, and then
You can't leave.
Steve and I walk out, that leaves
Can't
4.
do that.
We're stop, dead stop, okay,
So you have to either stay or adjourn.
okay. Okay.
We're hoping we have a few more members show up.
I
So
don't know.
we'll just leave it open.
I'm having a tough time believing that Jim, Gwen,
I have to leave at 2:55, cause I have to be back across the street at 3, but that's all right.
Yes, yes.
I don't constitute your quorum. I would if I could, if I could add to your number,
If you
I
could.
would.
Is Jim coming?
we don't end up with 5, I can't.
I know.
Okay, want to make sure we're on the same sheet of music.
Can you get Mr. Morrow on the phone?
Joseph,
Can you? Should you? I don't have his number.
These are the 2 companies?
No, just one.
Do they know what's happening? Okay, I was gonna walk over and tell them so that they understood.
They did, yes, you
Okay.
You were awesome. Absolutely.
You bet it.
We need one more.
Oh, good, we're getting closer.
Fanny will be.
We're trying to make sure we have a quorum, Jim.
They called this meeting for 1 o'clock.
Whoever voted for it.
Hey, be glad it wasn't for 3.
Maybe we should,
Maybe you should let it alone.
I told him you did.
Well, it's probably true. That's probably true, boy.
It's late.
I'm sure.
Hello?
Put everybody in the lodge. Okay, good. If he doesn't get here by 1:30,
David Lucky.
if he didn't get here by 1:30, we'll go to.
How are you?
It started. All right, who's speaking over there?
Probably, well, nobody is signed up for speaking.
No, I mean, over there.
The sheriff,
I heard a door.
me, Joseph
Sheriff's
Thacker. It's always supposed to be 5 minutes. That's all.
I just, okay, there's that.
David, Spaulding County.
I figured if I didn't show up with this, I'd.
Your name would be mud.
You would be in lots of trouble.
I told you, put a hit out on the spell paper and tell you.
Don't.
That's mine.
It's all Joseph.
I don't know what else we could have done. I feel like we have been blasting this thing out since the last.
I think I hear Dick.
Stop talking and come in.
No, that's not Dick.
Test 1, 2.
What was that comment you made about the airline being on time or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, what was
Have you ever
that?
been on a
Oh,
flight?
that's right, that was Eastern, they went out of business, never mind.
That's just wrong.
The only time a plane is ever on time
Joseph,
is when you're the
in all
last
fairness,
one on
we
board.
should
Well, the second you made the comment, I was like, hey, you're playing on time in about 3 months now.
I completely agree.
Clay, or at the original
In all
gate.
fairness, we need to shift the schedule by however many minutes late we are starting.
Sure. Yes, ma'am.
It's not fair to cut somebody short.
Whoop, whoop. Just bear with us.
Just fine.
We're all new at this.
Did you go to the parking lot?
He said he's on the way. I said, how far out? So hopefully he's.
I thought I heard him, but it wasn't.
I hope it ain't
wasn't like
Williamson.
he-
So this is a specially called meeting for you, I assume. It's not, you don't normally meet Fridays at one.
No.
No.
Usually Wednesdays at 8:30.
Oh.
Yeah, I heard it.
Staying busy. Closing of Highway 16. Jeez, God.
Open the hood. You usually see a fender well.
No, they pour all that stuff in there. They harden it in the oven.
There ain't nothing there. I'm looking at the outside skin of the fender.
This is the lowest reach, okay.
My truck, I swear, I'm telling you, they poured the motor in there and they hardened it in the oven.
3D printed it.
You can't slap a piece of paper around in there to get it. On the 9th, we have pre-agenda, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just
Unless
make-
you wanna move it a week since we moved the meeting.
No, we'll do that.
Unless you're gonna be out of town.
But it is already set for the night, whatever you want.
I'm out of town. Yeah, we'll do that, then we'll do the millage. And then I've got, are you doing a tour of the hospital? Is that, have you been invited to a tour of the hospital? A formal tour of the hospital? Okay, okay, there's a tour night, I just don't know who's invited, we're getting there.
I get a board meeting request for June 2023.
Yep. Bianca is always making sure.
Like that airport authority meeting.
All she does is regional boards. And so when she gets ready to tune, all right, for all of us, 11 hospitals, she has to put. I thought, okay, I can always say yes to this and you're out.
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah.
I have a hard enough time scheduled for next week. Did you ask Gwen if she was gonna call?
What'd she say?
I haven't heard.
Okay.
She said see you tomorrow, Monday, she said see you at this meeting. I forgot the exact words.
Send her a text real quick and say, hey, we started her off the week.
Not yet. I'm still further down. It won't open. No, because I have to turn it off every time I come in here for my phone. It won't work. I don't know. It works. detour? What's the detour?
Commercial traffic, it's probably 20. Yeah, but that makes all.
State coverage. So the lady said,
But that's just a nightmare.
I don't hear very well, I just heard the words artifact, saw you, and I just made the assumption that that was about,
You know,
I'm calling all
it's
15 people.
faster to get to 75 from my house,
Some people are calling me
75
saying,
south from
how
my
are you,
house.
are you gonna be able to run
How
through
long
the
is
hospital
it?
building, do the whole business?
I can avoid Highway 16, but there are lots of things who can't. Who are not really happy.
Yeah,
Hopefully they'll be having added giant bumps and stuff.
Yeah, those that have left parts of their concrete there. Probably.
For weeks on end, DOT's not picked up.
so I routinely, we understand they really spend money. We understand that there's probably a possibility of having a fair house. They're 50 for a year. So that was,
She's coming, she's just gonna be late. I was hoping that would've. A little late.
One, come on, one. Sir?
here's something that's really Steve was the one who wrote this, tear back. And you look at where the new homes are gonna be built. So we met with the manager over there and everything. And I started looking around and talking about those 3,000 homes that are gonna be built.
Your door.
Sure, your door.
Because sewage. Sun City.
We can just pretend there's
So we're.
somebody else. Yeah.
Thereabouts.
Much For me, yeah, yes, zero lot line.
In Aaron Bay with $700,000 houses. That's what they've got. Have you been over there?
They got some pretty nice houses, and the funny part is, Sun City, our mind was Sun City, Aaron Bay, pretty close to the truth. Sun City, part of our HOA dues is the grass is cut, mowed, edged, and all that. You know, so Aaron Bay, it's not, so you drive down, there'll be 3 nice wood cut lawns. The next one is knee-high deep grass. See?
That's what we're doing.
Yeah, yeah, it's just.
But
Yes.
in certain areas, but there's certain parts of the country still forested. Driving the main entrance, it opens back up into a subdivision. It's tight, contracted. It's all facilities in it. But it's just, I think they've done a fabulous
We
job
not tell.
managing that growth coming in.
Cheryl's gonna go out the parking lot. Yeah, we were looking at you thinking.
I really like for me to. Where would you like for me to?
Clay salad.
He's gonna come in laughing. You might punch him.
Across the street.
and welcome to the Spalding County Water and Sewer Facilities Special Meeting. It is August 5, 2022. It is about 1:14 in the afternoon. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order and request that everybody silence their cell phones and all other electronic devices. I'd like to ask Ms. Matlock to lead us in the invocation and Mr. Cannon to lead us in the pledge to the flag.
Heavenly Father, first of all, we want to say thank you. We have been blessed so richly, and please let us never take those blessings for granted. Please be with us this day as we listen, as we learn, as we deliberate. Guide us to our decisions, and God be with us as we travel. Guide us safely back to our homes. For we pray all this in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize to everyone. I was at a meeting and I just could not get out.
Thank you. Thank you. And welcome, Ms. Gwen Flowers Taylor. This time, I'd like to have a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second. All right, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, making sure I count, have enough hands. All right. In an effort to make sure that everybody works out the time and their watches and everything else, how this is gonna work, we started late. We're going to give them their full hour. Unfortunately, the next people are going to have the same wait time that you got, and then we'll go into them to be able to do that. In about another 10 minutes or so, I'm gonna need to step out. Mr. Cannon will take over, and then I will step back in along with the county manager. So everybody understands how we're gonna do this.
You might want to tell them why.
We're having a funeral service for a deputy that was killed Sunday morning. It'll just be 30 minutes across the way. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ms. Gwynn, you're gonna stay? Thank you. Citizens' comments.
I think we're going straight to new business, if that's okay with the board.
Financial, water superintendent, old business. We're into the new business. Interview of Grisham Smith from 1 to 1:45. Then we'll have 1 to
1:16 to 2:02.
yes, to what he said for time. And then we will start with that time and go for 15 more minutes for questions and answers. All right, everybody up on that? Time for your presentation. I'm sorry about this getting a little screwed up. Please understand, this is really important to us.
So, thank you, everyone, for having us here today. We're really honored to be shortlisted.
Can you turn that microphone towards you or get?
Is this better, sir?
Yes,
All right.
thank you.
So we're very honored to be shortlisted. We're honored to meet you and to be here today. So in this presentation, we're going to take you through the agenda. Technical difficulties. So in this presentation, we're going to walk you through an introduction of our team and our vision, not just our vision for the project, but our vision for partnering with you. We're going to talk about our understanding of the project as you've voiced it to us, and our understanding of the 4 target areas. Will be about 20 minutes in at that point. Then we'll switch into our feasibility study approach, as was in our proposal, another 10 minutes there. Then we'll shift into the 8 prescribed questions that you provided us with, hopefully allowing some additional time at the end for any open-ended questions that you may have. So our team, the org chart featured on the following slide is what was in our proposal, and this is a comprehensive team that would serve you start to finish for any of your needs as you grow in this process. So some things like hydraulic modeling you may not need at this time, but we have the staff, we have the team formulated, and the subject matter experts to serve you throughout the process. And I'm going to introduce the team members in this room today and why they're here. So I'm Rebecca Lindsey. I hope to be your project manager, and I've worked on many wastewater systems from very small to very large, including City of Palmetto, population 4,200. Been working with them for 20 years, and then all the way up to Fulton County. Recently completed a wastewater master plan for them. And I am responsible for ensuring excellence in delivery of this project, making sure you have the right subject matter experts and the capacity and the commitment that you need. Also, just a shout out to Joseph that I have the best MBA degree in the world. Cameron here. Cameron is my go-to right hand for most of the sewer work that we're doing, including the work in the City of Palmetto, which we'll speak about. And he also he's leading the Fulton County plan review for water and sewer. So Cameron intimately understands what's required in working with developers and in meeting their water and sewer capacity needs, whether they're proposing a development in an area that has sewer already or not. Hal, besides being just an awesome wastewater engineer, is here because he has specialized experience with interjurisdictional agreements, IJAs or IGAs for intergovernmental agreements, and experience with a large number of smaller wastewater systems. And Randy is our treatment expert and brings more than a few decades of experience here locally and working with the state in treatment.
Impressive, thank you.
So our project vision, at the foundation here, we want to be your trusted advisor, meaning we much more than this project, we want to build a relationship with you. We want to be your go-to advisor. We're going to stand behind our commitment to bring the right subject matter experts to have the capacity that you need, and we will always live and work for you by our core values, which are teamwork, respect, integrity, and commitment. Building on that, genuine ingenuity, as you saw in the beginning, that's Gresham Smith's tagline. It just means that we're going to bring you creative but proven solutions with a holistic and flexible approach to meeting your needs in what is this project or this practical roadmap. Hand it over to Randy here to talk about that practical roadmap.
Thank you, Rebecca. Good afternoon. If you can't tell, we're really excited to be here, potentially partnering with you guys on moving into the wastewater management business. When we sat down with you in May, talked about your vision for this project, we heard some key critical messages. First and foremost, any recommendation or outcome from this study ought to be financially viable, needs to be financially viable. Sewer drives development. Economic development needs sewer. The authority needs to get into the sewer business, but it can't go broke doing it. So anything that comes out of this study, any direction we agree to move in with you has got to be financially viable. And our study will provide the first step in a roadmap towards that goal. Secondly, and almost as crucially, is that you want a feasibility study. You want a 30,000-foot look at the landscape of getting into the sewer business, not a comprehensive wastewater master plan. The information you have at present, the data available is insufficient to move in that direction. It would be premature to do so, and it would be not a good use of the authority's time and resources to do that. So we've got it. We're taking a broad look at the landscape of getting into the sewer business. Along those lines, we will work within this study framework using available data. There's no intention to go on an extensive data collection effort, flow monitoring, et cetera. Again, we're looking at what you've got now and establishing a framework for moving forward. Along those same lines, we know that you're interested in collaborating with other entities, other utilities potentially, but you want to preserve your service area because that's a future basis for your revenue and your sewer business. So that's certainly an important driver. And you're interested in looking at innovative funding, including public-private partnerships, cost-sharing agreements, IJs, other opportunities to smooth the way into the sewer business and make it, again, meet those financial viability goals. We also understand that the authority is not interested in taking on development of a new centralized large wastewater treatment plant. The emphasis is on decentralized treatment and looking at opportunities, again, for that collaboration with other utilities and entities through agreements and cost-sharing formats to manage wastewater. Lastly, or I guess almost critically, is the fact that you have 4 unique service areas or potential 4 unique target areas, each with its own characteristics, own development patterns, own existing and future potential conditions. And each of those will be addressed specifically and independently in this feasibility study. Again, that will set forth a roadmap going forward toward the next steps in developing and getting you into the sewer business. So with that, Hal is going to come up and talk about those 4 target areas.
Can you hear me if I speak this loud?
Yeah.
Okay. Again, I'm Hal Humphrey.
Hal, although we can hear you, if you'd move to the mic, it's recorded.
Oh, I didn't realize
We have to
that.
do
Okay.
minutes.
Is this good?
Excuse me.
Yes, sir. So I'm Hal Humphrey. I've been in this business for 25 years. I'm an outside the fence guy. So I'm a collection system. I don't get into plants. And I've been blessed to work from cities the size of St. Louis, 4th largest sewer utility in the country, to Spalding, Georgia, which you probably all know where that is. Very, very small. So very, very unique. You've got the commercial area, you've got the area under moratorium, you've got the industrial area, and you've got the residential area. So the first area is the Noonan Road corridor out west of the city of Griffin. Beautiful area, a lot of farmland, saw some cows out there. It goes up to Coweta County, and that's primarily receiving some residential pressures there that you're looking at. What I talked to Randy about yesterday, it's very interesting, the residential area, in my mind of the collection system guy, kind of leads me to think about an IJA or possibly a package plant, because taking that much sewer in a residential area that far, I'm not an expert on the treatment, but it just seems like that would be a heck of a cost for residential. The next area is Area 2, out east, the Arthur K. Bolton area that's more industrial. That goes up to Butts County, and my understanding is that possibly a new airport might go just north of that, just to the east of Griffin. Area 1 and Area 2 are very long corridors compared to the other 2. So that's interesting to me. And Area 3 is north, the North Expressway, going up toward Henry County. And that is north of my favorite restaurant in the world, which you have a lot of, Chick-fil-A. Ate there last night. So that is primarily a commercial area with some septic tank challenges, to say the least. And south is the shortest corridor. That is the Tri-County. I guess that would be Lamar, Pike, and Spaulding. And that area is commercial. That's not in the city of Griffin, but served by the city of Griffin. So we're going to go through the top of this, which is area-specific considerations. We're going to talk about different types of growth in the next slide. But the main point of this whole study, I like themes. Sewer is a powerful tool to decide when development happens and where it happens. That's why we're here, right? So number one, you have limitations on septic, not just in Area 3, but all over the United States. They fail, they age, they're a high cost to homeowners and private citizens. You have a tremendous IJA opportunities with Butts County and Coweta and Henry and Lamar and, of course, City of Griffin. And when you have a master plan, you want to be in conformance with it. Now, the next slide, I'm going to blow it up. So when you see it, it's going to be a lot of words. You don't have to try to read them. I'm going to make them bigger, okay? But it's interesting. We were working in parallel, that your question 4 talked about a ranking criteria. And so what we did is we put together an extensive list. It's not exhaustive, but it's extensive and has what you need. So to blow it up for eyes like mine, about to be 47 next week, these are the criteria. I'm not going to go through each one of them. We certainly can in Q&A. But what we thought for the ease of the presentation was maybe to select one of those criteria that's unique to each one of the areas. So we'll start with Area 4. In that area, where would you think about where you might have the most potential for state or federal funding? Now, there's a big argument, not a big argument, there's an argument internally whether it's 3 or 4 would be the biggest possibility. Typically, you might be able to get funding when you have a moratorium. My understanding is the moratorium's capacity, which is typically why a moratorium's done, but really during dry weather. But also Area 3, where you have the aging septic tanks, would be also eligible for funding. The next one's Area 3. This one surprised me as we kind of debated it internally. Where might you get the most contribution from impact fees? I, in my mind, thought residential. But we talked about it, commercial would probably be the biggest one in our mind as we ranked this before this presentation. And that's because you could have the commercial fund the cutovers, I call them crossovers, the cutovers from septic over to the sewer system. Next up's area one, where when your developer invests, he or she, they want payback as soon as possible and fully refunded. And which one of the areas would be the most likely for that? We believe that would be residential. Typically, that's what we see across the country. And last is area two, which probably talks to everybody, who would be affected the most for your taxes. And we believe that would be an industrial development and flows there. Now, I'm about to get out of my comfort zone, so I'm gonna turn it over to the other folks, because the last item here is localized or packaged plants versus centralized treatment. With that, Cam, you're next, buddy.
Thank you, Hal. Yes, sir. Thank you all for having us. We really appreciate it. My name is Cameron Traylor. I'm a project manager with Gresham Smith. I've got a little over 10 years of experience. Hal was the one who hired me, so we have a long history, and then I had the pleasure of working with this great team here when I moved from Bama to Georgia. And so I've worked all things, studying, planning, and designing all, sewer and water pretty extensively. And we understand that you want to get into the sewer business and determine if it's feasible. We're gonna provide for you a study that has all kinds of recommendations and things for you to make that determination. And we're gonna do this 4 ways. 4 ways. One, first, we're gonna look at the existing conditions. We're gonna look at, obviously topography is big, but development, trends from the past and kind of what they're gonna go into the future. Second is trends in permitting, trends in, state health department, NPDES. Third is gonna be strategies for smart and sustainable growth, or in other words, how we're gonna pay for it. And last but not least is implementation and how we're gonna implement this plan. So I'm gonna talk about chapter 1 is the existing conditions. And first and foremost, you need to know where development is happening and where they're planning to go. And you know your county and the developers better than anyone. So we're gonna really lean and work with you to get all of that information and get it from the developers to know where they're going. And second, once we know where they're going, is policy conducive, for the growth that's going to happen and occur. Next up is this, septic viability. So I'm going to ask a question here, and anyone can answer. How many gallons of wastewater do you produce per day?
I'm saying 360.
300. That's a good guess. That question happily keeps me gainfully employed with Gresham Smith. The answer is, on average, 100 gallons per person per day. And then we have to make an assumption on how many people are in a household, and we'll use census data, but rule of thumb is 3 per house. So 300 gallons per home per day, and that doesn't sound like much. And over time, it starts to build up, and then you start having growth, these big developments, residential areas. And before you know it, we're looking at, 500,000 gallons, million gallons of just, wastewater flowing underneath our feet every day. And this water travels in the groundwater table and then to our waterways. Now, the theory behind septic is that the ground filters out the wastewater, and the ground does a fantastic job of filtering out water. But what the ground doesn't do is filter out nitrogen. Nitrogen, bear with me here, we're going through science class. Nitrogen is almost like HGH to plants, or PGH if you will. Algae eats it up and then starts to grow like crazy because there's a lot of food for it. Algae is then food for other bacteria and bugs. And so what happens in your waterways is the bacteria eat the algae, they grow like crazy, and then they steal oxygen that the fish were using. And so you can kind of see the snowball effect of what happens with septic systems and not treating the nitrogen. Now, that's not happening here, as far as I know, and that's just a worst case scenario, but that's something to look for when we talk about septic. And lastly is topography. The old saying is water flows downhill, and when it doesn't and when it can't flow anymore, we have to put in a pump station. And then the pump stations pump it up high, and then it will flow by gravity again. And obviously these pump stations cost money. not just to build, but to maintain. And that's a lot of things that are overlooked early on when thinking about pump stations is the maintenance cost involved in that. So we will, look at all these items here. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Booker, talk about trends.
You guys are getting a lot of speakers today. Bear with us. We're so excited, we just had to spread the joy. So chapter 2 in our approach here, trends and projections. So what we intend to do with this chapter is to answer the question, where are we headed? Cam just talked about where we are now, where the authority is now. Where are we headed? And the most important component of answering that question is projections. Projections on how much wastewater do we have to manage and where is it coming from? And in terms of where is it coming from, what part of the authority's service area, and what are the sources? Is it residential, commercial, industrial? And so understanding that informs our ability to help the authority understand what to do with the wastewater. So you know what's coming down the pipe, you know where it's coming from, and you have to answer the questions about what to do with it. And again, we've talked already about collaborating with other jurisdictions in terms of managing that wastewater, IJAs, other agreements to offload that wastewater. But the other alternative, or a companion alternative approach, is to get in the business of decentralized wastewater treatment. And one of the key considerations, one of many, if you make the decision to do that, is to think about the size of that decentralized treatment, where to assign it and locate it, because that has big implications in terms of the permitting and compliance burdens that those facilities will be under. And we'll talk about those types of facilities a little later on, but this is just an example relative to permitting requirements depending on flow size. So as you can see, you go all the way from local health department approvals all the way up to full-on EPD and NPDES permit type situations. So those are the types of considerations that will be informed by evaluating the available data in terms of projections that we have, flow and flow quantity and flow source, and then help us define what further data collection, flow monitoring, other information needs that we would like to have or need to have to move forward in the next steps past this study scope. So with that, we're then going to hand it off to Rebecca to talk about where we want to go.
So we talked about where are we now, what are the trends. This is the question, what does smart growth look like, where do we want to go? And so we're going to answer the question, what does the solution look like, what is a model for the probable location and the characteristics of your wastewater system? And ultimately, this is going to help us give you some budgetary numbers to understand what are we talking about for capital cost and what are we talking about for annualized, annual O&M cost. And that leads us into the question of funding. So we've listed, not comprehensively, but we've listed several options here. There are many that I'm partial to because they're on a pro rata flow basis. So the higher user would pay more money. That seems fair. So that could be done through capacity allocation, where the authority develops the infrastructure and then you sell off capacity according to how much demand there is. You could have a reimbursement agreement. These are popular, where the mover shaker developer, the initial developer develops the infrastructure, and then that entity sells off the capacity. Escrow agreements give you a vehicle if you don't want to operate like a bank. You can have the developers who have interest in funding the project enter into an escrow agreement up front. You get the infrastructure built, and then you settle out those agreements based on what it actually costs. And then impact fees are regulated by the Georgia Development Impact Fee Act, more of a governmental vehicle, but also ascribe cost to developments to pay for growth. That's what they are designed to do, and they're pretty heavily regulated. P3s are public-private partnerships. That's a scenario in which you would leverage a private entity to finance, build, and or operate your facilities. Could be really attractive if you want to have a more hands-off approach, but the agreement with the private entity, they're in this to make money, so there's generally tax concessions or revenue streams that have to be negotiated a number of federal and state grants and loans with some like the CDBG, which I'm sure you're familiar with, more for generally for smaller projects, moving up to very low interest loans through the state revolving loan program, and then ARPA has been big lately and is a huge source of federal funds coming down. System funds would be the revenues that you generate in your system for revenues for usage, tap fees, penalties, late fees, that sort of thing would be system revenues. Reserve funds like debt and emergency reserves, and then system generated replacement funds would be in the category like bonds, again, more of a governmental entity. So we answered the question in chapter 3, where do we want to go, and get an idea of what the potential funding mechanisms may be.
Back at you. So with all that great information that we're going to develop in these first 3 chapters of our approach, we ultimately come to chapter 4, an implementation plan. How do we get there? We've identified where we want to go. How do we get there? And ultimately, that's the ultimate goal of this feasibility study, is an implementation plan, a roadmap to get you into the sewer business and do it sustainably, financially, beneficially, and serve the growth and citizens of your service area, ratepayers. The critical elements of that implementation plan that we will provide guidance on moving forward on include, perhaps first and foremost, a comprehensive wastewater master plan. So we will define the scope and the basis for moving forward with a comprehensive plan that will undoubtedly include additional data collection and evaluation, additional planning and forecasting. We will also develop a basis for we will identify and develop a basis for moving forward with IJAs, with other utilities and entities that are potential partners, establishing cost-sharing agreements, and identifying other approaches, including public-private partnerships, to sustain financially viable, a financially viable move into the sewer business. Thirdly, you're going to be taking on a new utility. You're going to be in the sewer business. In order to do that, you will need updated sewer codes and ordinances, basically governance policy for how to govern your sewer system. And that will include things like service and connection requirements, rate schedules, development requirements, industrial pretreatment program requirements relative to industrial dischargers, and a whole host of items relative to governing your new system. And then lastly, you're going to have to manage that system. And so our study will define elements related to successful management of a sewer system, including things like asset management, data collection, compliance management, data recording, staffing, and other aspects to successful management of a sewer system. So these will all be laid out as part of our study documentation, giving you a roadmap to move forward in these areas. So with that, it sort of completes our core presentation. We did receive these 8 questions that the authority was interested in having specific responses to. So we're going to move forward, and feel free to interrupt us at any point as we answer these if you want to elaborate or discuss them further. But our first question, we'll hand off to Cam. And
May I ask a question before you start?
Sure.
Yeah.
This one you just covered, this chapter 6, the 4 IJA wastewater policy and management. Those are recommendations for follow-on funded studies. This is not part of the original, but this is come back to us and say, if you want to do this, pick a scope and a price for those follow-on
Yes,
pieces.
sir. We actually, in a moment, have a slide that says what we are going to do and what we aren't going to do. And we'll try to address that question better.
I'll shut up and wait.
Okay, so the result of some sewer feasibility studies that we've done in the past. So I've got 3 kind of groupings of projects that were all in a study area in Palmetto. And each of them took 3 kind of different approaches. The first was a series of developments along this corridor that did not have any sewer, and City of Palmetto and Fulton County, we came to an agreement to provide a large about 3 miles worth of trunk sewer to be brought to these developments and to give them sewer. The second was a single developer for all of these, and there were no options for sanitary sewer. So we put it completely on the developer to pay for the pump station that was required. It was a regional pump station that we came up with there to then pump it, another 2 miles to the sewer outfall that was close by. And last, this little company out of California called Microsoft is coming to town to build a large warehouse, and there were no options for sewer early on when they wanted to build immediately. And a mix of an IJA and putting this on the development here, we kind of came up with an agreement that Microsoft is going to tie in to a private pump station, which generally is a no-no, but we came up with an agreement for them to be able to tie onto that while also creating an escrow account to put funds in while the design and construction goes for a new regional pump station for them. And once that's up and running, they will then pull off the private pump station and go on to the pump station that they did pay for. Next question.
Question 2 is discuss a project where local and regional collaboration was needed in the project outcomes. Mentioned earlier this master plan for Fulton County. This was the South Fulton wastewater capacity evaluation, which I led. It involved all of the South Fulton cities. There were 7 cities that were stakeholders, and we had to coordinate with each of them individually. This involved a follow-on project doing a rate study, which also looked at not just the usage rates, but also the upfront capital investment that would be required for each of the interjurisdictional agreements to fund the capacity of the treatment plant that needed to be provided for. And it coincidentally led to collaboration with EPD on the water supply, because the study found that the wastewater projections actually exceeded the available water supply. So that has been interesting. How's that?
The next one was about transportation and land use plans, and I was reading through the Spalding County Comprehensive Study, because that's what I do on my free time, and that this is mentioned in throughout the executive summary in the first couple of chapters. So land use and zoning's going to definitely drive it. That's kind of the low-hanging fruit. The other thing is, and I like to make it simple, if you're a developer or redeveloping, you want to go to what's easiest to get to. And the easiest to get to is going to be something that's already got roads. So the transportation, what you already have in place, is going to be the #1 place you go if you're redeveloping. So I think that answers that. Question 4, this was the earlier slide we went through. You asked for ranking criteria. One thing we like to look through as a company at Gresham Smith and in a study is through the lens of the triple bottom line, which is just one way to say you look at the financial aspect, the environmental, so financial, upfront cost, operation and maintenance, O&M, the environmental, how does it affect your water quality, also in the comprehensive plan in my nighttime reading, and the bugs and bunnies, right? And social is the people that live here and play here and work here. But I also like to say there, the easy way to remember that's people, planet, and profit. It's easy to remember. So the next slide is the ranking criteria that we talked about. And you don't have to read this. We can go into it deep in the Q&A. The main point I wanted here is, again, all the different categories we had for ranking. So what we're going to do is sit down with whoever at the authority and any other stakeholders, and we're going to weight the ranking criteria to figure out which ones really are the most important. They typically go down to 2 things here: financial and treatment options. So we're going to rank the rankings. That's the way I look at it. So that on to question 5.
Question 5, as stated in the RQ, the authority expects each corridor to sustain itself through.
Could you
sewer
step up
revenues.
our microphone again, please, so we record this?
Discuss the various ways each corridor will be analyzed financially. So we will evaluate each of the 4 target areas independently. It's important for us to understand when flow is going to occur, where, and how much. We are not proposing a rate study. That is premature. You have to have, for starters, very accurate flow projections to form the backbone of a good rate study. What we're proposing is that in this feasibility study, we look at the capital and the O&M, get an idea of funding sources, And then in phase 2, we would do a cost of service study.
Okay. Question 6. Will the final report give the authority a modest beginning projects with priorities that lead us into major sewer service capabilities as time and growth occur? I think our answer is yes, it will. But we thought a maybe more specific way to answer that is to sort of define what we believe or what we intend for the study to do and why, and what it will not do and why. So the study, and we've touched on a lot of this already, the study will provide the authority with a picture of total annual cost budgetary by target area relative to the options that we identify based on the information available that we have. We will look into opportunities and identify opportunities, low-hanging fruit, if you will, for interjurisdictional agreements and other cost-sharing partnership opportunities. We will align each of the target areas' needs with the appropriate funding mechanism at a planning level. And essentially, as we said before, this study will be a roadmap for next steps into getting into the sewer business. And again, this is relative to the first slide we talked about, which is we're honoring the authority's view that this study should take a broad 30,000-foot view of opportunities, challenges, and issues related to getting into the sewer business. We will not, as part of this study is not a master plan. We've covered that. We will not provide a comprehensive master plan because it's not appropriate and it would be premature, as we discussed. We're not going to be developing a detailed financial plan for budgeting and operating a sewer utility. We won't be implementing IJAs, of course, at this stage. We won't be applying for or negotiating for any funding agreements or opportunities. And under the study, we won't be doing detailed flow evaluations or projections, as Rebecca just discussed. And why, again, we've covered this to an extent. This study is a roadmap for next steps. Respecting the available data and the authority's intentions and ambitions related to this study, we're looking at a roadmap approach, and it just would be premature to do otherwise. So again, we agree with the authority's staging of moving into the sewer business. Lastly, let's let Hal finish.
So this is really about protecting, because of some of the features of the area, protecting the industrial and commercial areas from less desirable, in those areas, residential growth. It's really in tandem. 3 things. Number 1 is, as we talked earlier, zoning, development regulations, codes. You got to talk. You're an authority, so you've got to deal with jurisdictions that are, with deciding on those land uses and those zoning. And then it goes into the next item that Rebecca mentioned earlier. I always have a tough time getting it right, but pro rata. So you got to look at your development, the cost of doing business, the cost that you put in possibly for an industrial development might be much more than you put in for a residential. And that dovetails right into number 3. When you look at connection fees, capacity fees, like my hometown, a graphite in Elliott City, Alabama, a graphite manufacturer came in, and they're going to be there for a long time. They're going to make a lot of money. And the city laid a force main about 12 miles for them. They put in the development costs, but they're going to get it back in water and jobs, right? So a commercial, or particularly an industrial user, is anticipating and expects higher capacity or connection costs more, and that would be an advantage for you to kind of, residential will not. So that's all in tandem, and I just ask you, let us help you protect your investment.
Okay, last question. What are the limitations and drawbacks of packaged sewer plants? Something I know something about. Here's a couple of examples of packaged plants. And when we say packaged plants, what we really mean, broadly speaking, is decentralized wastewater treatment. And that could be developer-driven and delivered in a packaged plant format, which essentially means a vendor-supplied, single unit, and largely single unit that's intended to treat a relatively small amount of flow for a specific local area. But it could be custom-designed, smaller plants run and owned by the authority, or in combination with public-private partnership, or developer-driven, as it often is. The pros of these types of systems, decentralized and packaged plants, but focusing more on packaged plants, are lower costs, right? You've got an area you need to provide treatment to. You design and implement under a very short schedule, a treatment system that is consolidated and modular. Lower costs up front. They can often be frequently automated, highly automated because of their modular nature, so potentially lower staffing requirements. And then you can size it based on a specific collection system demand or capacity need. You can implement it very quickly to follow development or drive development, accommodate development. And again, I mentioned they can be modular, so you can sort of domino effect them or I should say Lego effect them with additional units if additional capacity is needed. The cons, however, are in general a higher compliance risk. When you decentralize treatment, of course, while they can be automated and have lower staffing requirements, that can also result in lower levels of supervision that can result in compliance issues and reliability issues. Often packaged plants, particularly if they're developer driven and developer supplied, have a lower quality of materials. They're often designed right at the edge of capacity and compliance. So there's not a lot of buffer in there in terms of handling higher peak flows or changing conditions. So the overall legacy of a packaged plant could be, if the authority ended up taking one over, it could be a significant capital and O&M investment to manage that. And again, these may be designed really, again, a developer's trying to get things moving. They're not going to necessarily accommodate that system with the levels of redundancy and resiliency that a utility like the authority might. And so that can create potential challenges. But nonetheless, there are jurisdictions and utilities throughout the state and the country that are developing modular package plant policies that govern the implementation of these approaches and often include fees relative to potential future situation where the authority or entity needs to take over that unit from a developer. So important considerations there. So I think that wraps us up.
Yes, we just wanted to close on that note that we hope to serve you as your trusted advisor, build that relationship with you long term, whatever it is you need, and serve you according to our core values. And if there are additional questions, I know we went through those 8 rather rapidly. We'd love to open the floor here.
38 minutes. Oh, yeah, we got a few more minutes if they want to elaborate on anything before we get the question and answers. We kept y'all waiting, so.
Well, let me draw a little scenario that's on my mind. Take the east side of the country out, Arthur Bolton, industrial area. I could see where package plants might work for some of the industrial beginnings, if you will, that would morph into more and more and more in that basin, ending up in a full-size sewer plant. Is this the sort of thing that a roadmap would say, this is a starter plant, but it's not the final plant, sort of thing?
Well, for starters, we hope to really explore IJAs as being most likely your lowest cost and easiest means of entry.
A real beginner step, that makes sense.
Yes, sir. So that said, where IJAs are not viable or are cost prohibitive, we would look at these modular systems, and it doesn't have to unfold that every development has its own modular system. It can be that you identify a strategic location for a modular system, and you as the authority size it properly for the multiple developments that are in that sub-basin, and you devise the sewer network and a system for selling off capacity in that decentralized plant. Does that make sense? So it doesn't necessarily have to be a new modular plant coming up with every development that you see. I would hope that would not be the case.
A lot of these plants I know come in scalable sizes. You can add capacity.
Right. everything begins with knowing how much flow we're talking about. And that is an area where we're a little uncertain approaching this project, because we don't know what data we're going to get. We don't know. We're asked to rely on existing data, so we'll just have to take a look at. We want to understand your development trends and population trends, and do the best we can to quantify how much flow we're talking about and when in each of these areas. So with that, Hal, do you want to weigh in on? Yeah, I mean, so it depends on the flow, I guess, is the first answer to your question. With the IJAs, you can't begin a conversation with another entity about capacity in their system until you know how much capacity you're asking for and when you need that capacity. So flow is the backbone of everything, but our hope is that with initial conversations in the IJAs, we can see, does the other jurisdiction have available capacity that is ready for you to purchase it? And if so, they should be able to figure out what their costs for that capacity are and what it would be to sell off that capacity. If they don't have capacity, what is it going to cost to expand their facility and provide you with the amount of capacity in that facility that you need? Perhaps there's a capacity expansion needed. Griffin is a good example. Perhaps there's a capacity expansion needed at the Shoal Creek wastewater treatment plant, which would benefit both the city of Griffin and the authority. So, having a conversation about what does that capacity expansion need to be, how much flow are we talking about, and how would those costs be shared? So it's really coming to the table to understand, are we talking about $1 million? Are we talking about 10 million, 100 million? We need to narrow down what the costs are, and that is again going to inform. Maybe the best decision is to look at modular plants for an interim period before capacity is expanded.
Keeping on the IJA, have y'all successfully negotiated IJAs for a municipality where they kept their service area and not gave it up, where there's some type of conveyance fee or a wholesale rate?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So the South Fulton master plan and all the work that we've done in Palmetto and Fulton County. In South Fulton County, the city of South Fulton has said, we don't want it. Fulton County, you own and maintain the system. And so Fulton County has a certain strategy for expanding service there. Separately, Palmetto, Union City, Fairburn, others own and maintain their own systems. In the case of Palmetto, they have 1.1 pump station, and they convey the flow to Fulton County. They paid for their pump station. Fulton County paid for their receiving pump station. Flow is transferred at the meter. It's easy. In the case of Union City and Fairburn, there are meters throughout their systems. There are meters where it comes in and where it leaves again, so there's additive and deductive meters, and it's complicated, dozens of meters. And but all those systems continue to own and maintain, and so the individual cities have to set their rates to cover the Fulton County wholesale cost and whatever escalation is added to that, along with their own cost of owning and operating, maintaining their own system. So it's Fulton County is a very good example of different approaches. And Fulton County is expanding service into the city of Chattahoochee Hills, and where there's no sewer currently. So the county is extending pump stations, force mains. The county is setting regional pump stations where similar to your target areas, where there's a burst of development, they're setting a regional pump station, and they're expecting that Chat Hills coordinate with their developers to get flow to that pump station. Fulton County picks it up from there and conveys it into their system for their treatment.
Cut me off with these, man, I ain't got nothing else. Comment with the general manager, okay? Other comments or questions?
No, I thought it was well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I
Well done.
apologize for our tardiness.
It's okay.
And you just said something that I guess I missed the basic. Flow driven is what you said. Flow driven, which makes sense. If nothing else, I learned that today. First, you gotta figure out the flows, right?
It's really challenging, and that's one reason that we recommended that you have a 20-year planning horizon, because a lot changes in 20 years. So in Fulton County, we had a 50-year planning horizon, but we had different reasons for that, and they had different extent of infrastructure. But in your case, maybe somewhere in the crystal ball there's a centralized treatment system in the cards for you, but to step into that judiciously and in a way that is financially sound, it probably looks like looking at the next 20 years and looking at really what you have on the books. You have a good awareness of what developments are knocking at the door, what's right for development, and what development you want to see, and it all gets coordinated together. So the question about, like the residential growth, there are, it all has to dovetail with your comprehensive plan and how you want to grow, how you set your development regulations, even to the minutia of, what is the, when we do flow forecasts, residential developments, we look at what is the zoning, what is the maximum development density that's allowed for that residential development. And that's going to tell us how much flow we're talking about. And then on top of that, you can put your own restrictions about maybe you want a side entry garage, or you are excluding a certain facade or siding, and you can put in restrictions that dictate the character of residential growth that you want to approve, and where and how that occurs.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Rebecca and team, thank you for what you did. We appreciate it. For those of us, we'll take a 5-minute break and switch out and get ready for the next group. Thank you again.
Very nice job. Thank you.
Very nice.
Thank you for coming.
Okay.
What do we do with these?
Yeah.
Don't tear it up. Thank you. Learn more all the time. Thank you very much, sir. I'm learning more all the time. I'm an engineer, but not one of these giants.
Hey, Mr. Lane, how are you? How was it?
That's good. That's a good start.
That's right.
Don't you think that? They talk to us and not at us.
How was it? I'm sorry? Oh. Okay.
How are you, Rebecca? You can come sit up here. We have your place.
Hey, Mr. Lucky.
What's up?
How are you doing?
That was me. I had to do me.
Oh, Lord, no.
You may show up one Thursday and say, who had the meeting today? David Lucky. Really? We'll do one of those, who are the newest members? Come up here and tell us about yourself.
We'll be like, David Lucky. David Lucky is a new member. Come tell us about yourself.
How you doing? How you doing? Wade Campbell. David Lucky, good to see you.
Yeah, I keep hearing your name. I never see you.
I'm here.
Presentations. Do I give them all to you? Is that what you want?
How's the shortbread business, David? How's the shortbread business?
And then as far as
Good question.
the USB with the presentation, do I give that?
Sales is a good thing, but I mean, to me, it's relative. She does, goes over to Fayetteville, they have a line.
Yeah, I can do that.
Market.
Okay.
Really?
I mean, all the time. We've been to all but one.
Thing being here, you want to kind of point at it, I guess.
Well, that's cool.
She sells.
It's all in
That's
perspective.
kind of a challenge.
In case.
I keep looking at this because I'm a, yeah. Yes.
And you haven't made her put all that out.
Thank you.
I want to do that, just I think it'll help her.
Yeah.
But I would say this, in spite of all that, that's really kind of.
Like I said, I got a 16-year-old's birthday party to go to at my backyard.
So I understand.
Yeah.
And she needs to
Yeah, right.
Is she enjoying it?
If it was some long-term thing, I would insist. that she
Our own
do
book.
that, but
Yeah.
I have a big shelf full of books.
She's not gonna be Sister Schubert.
Well, she needs a commercial kitchen to take it to the next level,
Wouldn't that be wonderful?
like so many entrepreneurs. So the guy, if he and I are pretty close. We're gonna end up getting a commercial.
I hope so. When's he coming to speak to Rotary?
Okay, nice to meet you. Would be one of mine. Nobody gets him first. And he will certainly feel obligated to do it.
Yeah, you better ask him quick before somebody
I'll
else
find out when,
does.
quit my butt.
How are you? I'm Greg.
I'm David Lucky.
Nice to meet you.
Hey Greg, Stephanie, nice to meet you.
my chair. You're the attorney.
I am.
Good to see you, Greg. You doing okay?
Hi, I'm Clay Davis.
Okay. Chairman of the commission board? Okay. Great. Nice to meet you. Appreciate you having us this afternoon. And the young lady in the orange is Commissioner.
Wow, this looks very, very detailed.
Hey, how are you?
David. David.
Delta Lima, Sierra Lima over. Dave Lucky.
David Lucky. Mr. Lucky.
He can't talk and hear at the same time.
Mr. Lucky.
Yes, God. Take that, David.
Has Kim been hacked, or would she really have sent me something like that?
Yeah.
How are you? I'm Greg.
Greg Dick Martin, nice to meet you. Thank you for coming.
I don't think it's real.
I chair the planning committee.
Yeah, so I just got it, so she wouldn't have sent
We're the
it.
ones
I'm
that
not
drove
gonna
this
open
train
it.
to get
Yeah.
get
Are
you.
y'all GSDA.net?
And I'm the one that tells you if you're planning or not.
She's a financier. So she can shoot you down in a heartbeat.
Maybe so. Okay, I'm not gonna open it. I will.
That's right. That's right.
I'm waiting for Fanny to get back in here and we'll get going.
I have a response that includes to Christine, whatever.
I think yours, this is the aspect ratio. Okay. Other than that, one of them.
She is the same.
I got a feeling I'm gonna come out of this totally.
I mean, he's a constitutional officer.
It's kind of like the one we listened to about the joint authority. We were so far above my head in that, that I didn't know what I was doing. At least I know a little more this time.
What's obvious, these people know what the hell.
Yes, that's right.
I got a feeling it's gonna be the same here.
Like, just did some more research. When Judge Sam gets back, 'cause he has
to me like they've got a bunch of site-specific work that's gonna be like that overall.
Yeah,
I'm already interested in that stuff.
Yeah, aspect ratio.
I think that the other.
I don't know where you stand. That's a big one.
That's a lot.
Okay.
I wonder if it's true. I learned as a contractor. People write, yeah, doing all these presentations, what you're gonna do, and then they listen to them, and then they go dig themselves, and you go, and you waste all this time, budget.
No, they ready, you all ready to go?
Get you there.
Yeah, it is unique that, okay, it's a PowerPoint because that's what we do.
good thing I had just finished eating. I think that's a good day.
Okay, and it is showing me, okay, great. I would prefer to be up here looking at y'all.
We're back in session. At this time, we have interview or the presentation by Turnip Seed Engineers. We understand that we are off time. You'll have the allotted time all the way through from when we started, because we started late with. You'll get the full allotted time.
Okay.
Right? All right, turn it over to you, Greg. Got it?
Okay, and I know when the interview instructions were sent out, that it had 45 minutes for the presentation and 15 for questions. If it's okay with y'all, I would prefer to shorten the presentation and have longer for questions. Is that an okay format?
Your time.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll try and hold true to that. No guarantees, but, well, thank you for inviting us. We're thankful to be here. My name is Greg Ashworth. Been with Turnip Seed Engineers for 9 years now. Have with me Kenny Green, who is our president. Kenny has been with the company for 20 years now. And we're very thankful and look forward to hopefully working with you guys. So a little background on Turnip Seed Engineers. Our company was started in 1978, and the reason that Mr. Turnipseed started the company, it was started by a guy named Ben Turnipseed, is he had worked for several engineering firms and had worked his way up in those engineering firms. But one of the principals in the company that he was working for at the time said, "We do a great job with design, but we always lose the client afterwards." And that stuck with Mr. Turnipseed, and he said, "That's not the way that it should be. The client should be more happy that they chose the engineer they chose after the project than before the project." And so he started the company with that vision in mind. And over 44 years that we've been in business now, we've continued to grow. Some of the clients that we currently have, we've had for 44 years. And so his vision has played out. And a lot of that's from treating people the right way, from seeking to grow as our clients grow over time and doing right by our clients. We actually have 30 clients that we've had that we are active clients that we've had for over 24 years. So it's not just something that we say, it's not just a vision, but it is actually how it plays out. And the company is not just me and Kenny and Mr. Turnipseed. We have 48 people on staff, so we have lots of resources to help you guys out. We have 2 offices, an office in Atlanta, which I work out of, and an office in Augusta. And then if we are selected as your consulting engineer for this project, Kenny and I will both be working on that project. The people you see here today are the people that you'll be interacting with. We have a couple other people that will assist us as well. We're happy to answer any other questions you guys may have about Turnipseed, but a lot of that information will be in the statement of qualifications that we sent previously. So wanted to just get into your project and talk about the feasibility study. So really appreciate that you guys are thinking about this and the way that it's been laid out, and the process that you're going through. Understand that Spaulding County is poised for growth, and through reading through the comprehensive plan and looking at it, the plan is expecting around 30,000 people to be added to the county over the next 20 years. And the question is, when these 30,000 people get added, if they get added, are any of them going to require sewer and want sewer? And if so, who's going to provide that sewer for them? Is it going to be the Water Authority, or is it going to be the City of Griffin, or are we going to allow developers to determine what gets developed where? And so this is just an illustration that we have up here of how the county could develop. We tried to make the character go along with the designations that y'all had in the RFQ, but it's just theoretical. Obviously, things can change, variables can change, and we want you guys to be in control of as many of those variables as possible to be able to direct this as you want it to go. So in order to answer that question of who's going to provide sewer, if sewer is going to be provided, where it's going to be provided, how much it's going to cost, I think you're taking the right steps by having this feasibility study performed. And we would recommend for the feasibility study, you're going to need an engineer that has several things. One of them is an engineer that is close enough to you, that can come down for regular meetings, can be available to you. And this map here is showing all the active clients that we have within an hour and 15 minutes of you guys. So there's 18 clients up there. Our office is just over an hour away. We're right there at the new Braves Stadium up in Vinings. But closeness is not all that you'll need. You also need an engineer who understands the objective that you guys are seeking to accomplish, or the question that you're seeking to answer. An engineer who can come up with creative solutions, not just think, here's what we did last time, but is able to tailor the solution for Spaulding County and to think outside the box. An engineer who not just understands the planning aspects, but also understands the financial aspects and the design aspects of designing sewer systems. There are several sewer systems around you, Sonoya being one of them, where we designed the sewer system. And so they didn't have a sewer system when we started, and we helped them, and they've continued to grow over time. And I think, too, it's important to have an engineer that understands the importance of this document, that this is not just a report for a report's sake, but this is a report that is going to be trusted, is going to be looked at to make decisions for years to come. And so it needs to be very thought through. So when we're thinking about your report and the feasibility study, one of the things that we want to do is assess what are the current assets that we have that are going to affect the decisions. And we've got on here the 4 areas that were outlined in the RFQ. And the blue pins are the existing treatment plants in the area. The red pin, of course, is the Spaulding County treatment plant that is in the process of being commissioned. So as we look at these... Decommissioned, sorry, yes. As we look at these 4 areas, what we see is you've got 3 of them that are going to go to Shoal Creek as far as where existing sewer is, what basins they're in, and then the area 2 on the east side of town would drain to the Potato Creek wastewater plant. So as we look at that, this is information from the city of Griffin. We'll see that those two wastewater plants, they have excess capacity, which is good. And we understand that long-term, the plan may not be to always send the sewage to the city of Griffin, but a lot of times to start out a system, you have to do that, and in order to make it financially feasible. And so if you look at Potato Creek, the equivalent excess capacity is 1,600 homes. If you look at Shoal Creek, the equivalent capacity is 2,200 homes. And in some of these areas, and actually 3 out of the 4 areas, you guys have designated the character there as non-residential, but this is just to give you an illustration of how that capacity, what that means, 0.495 million gallons per day or 0.683 million gallons per day. And obviously all of that has to be negotiated. The city of Griffin may not be willing to give you all of their capacity at these 2 plants, but it is good that there is excess capacity if you want to go that route. Okay, so getting into the different areas, we went ahead, took out a topographic map and did some preliminary layouts for where sewer would go. So this area 1 is on the west side of Griffin and on the west side of the county. And this, just from a preliminary study perspective, this is the most feasible area, and there's several reasons for that. 1 is you have a really large drainage basin. 2 is, from the information you guys provided, it seems like this is a good area for residential growth, which can be good for starting a sewerage system or starting to provide sewerage service, because a lot of times you can have whole subdivisions that come in at once and they're willing to pay tap fees or impact fees up front, and that allows for significant capital investment, knowing that they've already paid their fees and we're not going to put this in and not have anybody pay for it. And the other reason is this is a big basin. In fact, it extends on up into Atlanta. But what you'll see here is it's a great spot for a treatment plant. Maybe not initially. I know that one of the keys to this report is being able to think through it and start small, and then how do we build up. But we want to, even if we're starting small, even if the initial solution is to pump to the city of Griffin for treatment, we want to be keeping in mind what's the long-term plan as well. And so designing sewers in such a way that it could eventually be converted to where you have your own treatment plant. And what you'll see here is this green shaded area is all of the county that drains to where that star is. So you could put it anywhere along that branch, and you would sewer, you could sewer all of that. You'll also see that red line going north, that's the north target area, so it's in this sewer basin as well. Great spot for a treatment plant, and definitely want to be taking that into account. So when we talk about treatment plants, there are lots of different options. We've designed lots of different ones. We're not, we don't have set ones that we only design these. So on the smaller side, when you're thinking treatment plant, you have some field erected or package plants. So you've got this steel circular one. They also make them rectangular. And then as you get away from or a little bit bigger than the package plant, we have these more modular. So the common wall treatment plants, this is one in Greenville actually that we designed. And the benefits of this over a package plant may be cheaper a little bit on the front side, but this is made of concrete, so it's gonna have a longer life. It's more easily expandable than a steel package plant would be. So long-term, if you're thinking there's gonna be growth, you may wanna look at a solution like this. And then this is in Columbia County, and this is one of the clients that Kenny has worked a lot with, but we designed the initial treatment plant here, which was 1.5 million gallons per day. And then it got expanded to 3 million gallons per day, then it got expanded to 6 million gallons per day, and now it's 12 million gallons per day. And you can see all these nice homes that have been built after the treatment plant was built. So they've become the neighbors of the treatment plant and really filled in around there. But yeah, none of those homes existed when the treatment plant was built. It was having that vision for people are eventually gonna wanna build here, and it's turned out 12 million gallons a day worth of people have wanna build in that basin, and we've worked with them all along doing each of those upgrades. Okay, this next area is the area on the east side of the county. So this is the area that is identified as a potential industrial expansion area. And it seems to be good for that. You'll notice this red line that just popped up, that's the ridge. So you've really got two basins here. The one on the south is gonna be more easily sewered. It presents itself well for sewering, and it would have a relatively low cost for providing there. So this is a very feasible option. And one of the things with industrial growth that we'll want to look at, we always try and position our clients to have as much grant money as possible. And so with industrial growth, we've helped our clients get employment incentive grants, economic development grants. There's a lot of grants that are associated with creating jobs. So we saw that in Tallapoosa, we saw that in West Point, where part of their sewerage improvements were paid for with those type grants. This area 3 is north of, on the north part of the county, and is potential commercial. It seems like there's a lot of failing septic tanks in this area, and there's a lot of interest in having sewer, from what I understand, in this area from people wanting to further develop the commercial corridor. It seems to be a great opportunity for that. One of the possible funding mechanisms for this area would be to look at a CID, or a community improvement district. So it's not a tax on the whole county, it's just whatever corridor gets assigned. It has to be voted on by the people in that corridor, but it is a funding mechanism and can be used for sewer, but not only sewer, can be used for sidewalks, any type of improvements. And there are several CIDs throughout Georgia, and they are located only in commercial and industrial areas. So you can't do that in residential. And then this area 4, so this is on the south part of the county, and this one is the one just on a preliminary level appears to be the most expensive, but as we do our evaluations, cost is just one of the factors. It's not the only factor in that, so it may end up being the most viable for other reasons. But as far as expense goes, this one looks like it would be the most expensive for several reasons. One is there's limited capacity in the city of Griffin's lines in this area. Also, this area doesn't have just a natural drainage basin where it's all draining to, so it would likely take multiple pump stations and it's not as clean as some of the other areas. To give you guys an idea of when we do a feasibility study, what do we do? So we recently did one for the city of Franklin Springs, and Kenny has a meeting there next week to talk about their plans further. But what we did is inside Franklin Springs, or inside Franklin County, there's 4 cities. So you got Franklin Springs there in red, and then the other 4 cities. And initially, the city thought, when they hired us to do the feasibility study, they thought and we thought that Royston has just upgraded their wastewater plant. They have some excess capacity. Obviously, the solution is going to be to send our wastewater to Royston. But we did the feasibility study, and what we found out was that that's not the best option, and I'll show you that in a minute. But they, like you guys, were trying to plan for growth, so they had several population projections, and I think that's one of the keys when we do a feasibility study is it's not, we can't project the future, but we can make estimates and different scenarios and say, okay, if this scenario plays out, then this will be your best solution. If this scenario plays out, this will be your best solution. The reason it increased like that is there's a college in that area that was expecting to significantly increase their enrollment, and so they thought the green line would be the best projection for them. And then we talked a minute ago about how financials are not the only factor. They do play a big part. We've got to make it work from a financial perspective, or it doesn't work at all. And you'll see that up reflected on here. So you've got 3 categories there that have costs associated with them. You have the capital cost, so the upfront cost, and typically we're getting that lowered by having grants or having partnerships or having some outside source pay for as much of it as possible on the capital side. You've got O&M, so a project might be cheaper starting up, but over time it takes more electricity or it costs more for maintenance or those kind of things. You've got life cycle costs. Environmental, one of the areas, the north area has some failing septic tanks, so that might increase that project even though it rates similarly to other ones financially, but just the ability to relieve some of the failing septic tanks may be important. You've got timeliness. Are there some projects that it would be a great project, but we're waiting on this key piece and we don't know when that key piece is going to come to fruition, and so we can't rate it as highly. And then you have regional impact. So you've got how does this line up with your plans? I know that there are some areas that have been designated as industrial, and it seems that the county doesn't want residential development to take up the sewer capacity in that area. And so how do we make sure that it aligns with that, or where are areas where the people actually want sewer? Because there might be one where it makes financial sense, but no one in that area wants it, and so it doesn't line up with the desires of the residents or desires of the businesses in the area, or it doesn't line up with the leadership of the county. And you see, this is from Franklin Springs, this is from our report, but the percentages here, the weights, that's something that you guys will rely on you to tell us how important is the cost versus the environmental versus the timeliness to help us rank these different projects. And you can see here for Franklin Springs, they had 5 projects once you split out 1A and 1B that they were looking at. in thinking about your feasibility study, we're thinking in those 4 areas, there's probably 25 projects that we would want to look at and rank and figure out which ones are more feasible. Some will be components of larger term or longer term projects, but want to be able to say, how do we rank these? How do we tell which is the best project to pursue, not just from the financial, but also taking these other factors and variables into account. So looking at cost, you can see this is the option they thought before we wrote the report. We thought that this was going to be the best option. It turns out after we wrote the report that the best option was to increase the capacity at their own treatment plant to 300,000 gallons a day. It worked out better as far as treatment costs per 1,000 gallons. You'll see that a lot in that as your flow goes up, the incremental cost per 1,000 gallons will go down. But it turns out, and this is why having a report that you can trust is so important. So that was the decision they made back in 2018, that was what they were going to pursue. So since 2018, there are 2 large industries that have said, hey, we want to connect to your sewer system and we're committed to coming. And they said, okay, well, now that we look at that, this is our best option. We want to go to 2 MGD to be able to allow those industries to connect to our system. So you can see as variables change, as long as the analysis was done correctly, you're able to shift which plan you go with. And I'll let Kenny talk a little bit about how he has seen this play out in Social Circle.
Sure. So the city of Social Circle had some decisions to make like you have. They had a county that was perfectly willing to take all of their sewage, or they could go at it alone and have their own facility. And so what we did is look at the different options, and it depended on how much growth they expected to see. And as you see at the beginning, these options of staying like they are or buying water or buying wastewater treatment from the county is cheaper right now with the amount of sewage they had to treat. But if they see growth coming, and their growth is up here in the 1,000,000 gallons, you see that very, very quickly having their own plant becomes cheaper and cheaper as it goes, because when you build the plant, you have to pay for the capital cost, the debt, whether you treat 1 gallon or 1,000,000 gallons. But as you treat more and you have that revenue, it becomes cheaper and cheaper per unit cost. So this is a plan that we went over last night. So they had some perhaps not very good planning in the past, or perhaps didn't have enough money to do things. And what happened is all of these little squares are sewage lift stations. And so there's 6 lift stations right there on that picture. There was actually a 7th right there, but we were able to divert it to the sewer about a year ago and get rid of that. And because they had all these, each one of them needed to be replaced at a point in time. So if you're spending $250,000 a piece and you've got 6, 7, 8 of them, that comes to be a lot of money, not to mention the cost of maintaining them. So we did a comprehensive planning report for them in 2018 and identified that there was a better way to do it, but we needed a funding source. So now there's a major industry that is locating right here, and that industry is going to have a pump station and pump up here. And then along comes another industry, and it's going to need a pump station and pump up here. So now you're going to have 8 pump stations in the total area. Well, they went back to their planning report and found out that those 2 up there can be combined into a single one. Both of them are shot and need to be replaced anyway. And then there is plans for the previous graph that they had decided a new wastewater treatment plant was their best option because they're growing and they expect to have the capacity to make it the cheaper option. So because of that, we're able to put in this regional pump station that we're starting on now. That'll allow us to eliminate these 2 pump stations and this other pump station over here. And then with this other sewer to it, we can eliminate 2 or perhaps 3 lift stations there. So the net result is instead of 8 current lift stations, they'll have 2 lift stations in the future. And they were able to do this by having a planning document so that they were ready to take advantage of the funding opportunities. And the funding opportunities is that part of this was already in a JEPA loan that they were able to divert some money. Part of it, there's a new program with state of Georgia called the Rural Innovation Fund, and it's not limited like some of the EIP and the One Georgia programs, the Edge and Equity. We're limited to about $500,000. Well, there's not a limit here. We met with them yesterday. They may be able to get $1 million, perhaps up to $2 million grant money. Also, these 2 industries are going to have a significant number of water users. So if you take that revenue and say, well, how much of a capital note will that revenue pay for? You find out that pretty much this whole project can be paid for with the existing revenue sources without raising rates for them. So that's just the advantage. Oh, and then they wind up having a significant area that they can sewer in the future. So that's just an example of having a planning plan in place to take advantage of the funding opportunities as they happen.
All right, so how do we pay for all this? One of the key components is rates. So this is City of Griffin's rates. So $10 per 1,000 gallons, and that's a pretty normal rate. So if we do provide sewer, you're going to want to be around that. So we've got to take that into account. Probably the range you're looking at is probably $8 to $15 per 1,000 for treatment is what we're looking at. And some of the ways that you help to lower that rate is what Kenny was talking about. So being creative on the revenue sources. So taking advantage of, okay, here's an industry and they're willing to put in a large capital investment, which allows us to have lower rates over time, because ideally we're keeping the rates paying for as much of just O&M, the operation and maintenance, the treatment as possible, and that we're able to pay for capital outside of that. So some of the different ways that you can get creative with this, in Henry County, when they started really expanding their water and sewer through the authority, they had a millage rate, and it was a tax increase. It was passed through the state legislature, but it has funded, and they have really grown. They're a huge utility now, and they very financially viable, and a lot of that comes from the local leadership there was on board with having a long-term plan for how do we provide sewer for the whole county, and the best way that they found, and it's worked really well for them, is having a millage rate. Not everybody likes tax increases, and so there are other ways to do that. One is possibly there's a lot of ways that sewer can be mutually beneficial both for the authority and for the county's plans. And so how do you make that relationship so that you're working together? And so it may be some type of agreement with the county where they are budgeting a certain percentage of their budget every year to help with some of these capital improvements and to come up with extending the system. You've got impact fees. So when someone wants to connect to your system, that there's a big upfront cost that they have to pay in order to connect to your system, which helps to offset some of your big upfront cost. You've got private-public partnerships. So there's different ways that you can do this, but essentially you're wanting the private party, so maybe it's a big industry who says, I have a big need for sewer, and I'm gonna need a lot of capacity. And you're wanting to say, okay, if we build this, I wanna make sure that I don't invest a lot of money and then you not come or not live up to the expectations. And so there are ways, and we can talk more about that later, but there are ways to help shift some of that risk to them. There's different loans and grants. We've talked about the CID. And then the rates are what makes up that last component that kind of finishes it out. So just looking, we did a very preliminary model for you guys, and this is based on initially having some type of, it's either a developer or industry that comes in and says, I really need sewer, I want you guys to put it in for me, and I will pay to put in, maybe it's a lift station and some sewer lines, just to get you started, and then y'all got to treat it and take it from there. And so we mapped it out over 20 years, what you're looking at. And the reason that the cost to treat is going up here is just inflation. So in today's dollars, it's not actually gone up at all. It's just $14 20 years from now is the same as $8 is now if inflation is 3% every year. So it's not that the cost of treatment is going up, but it is if you look at it in real dollars. And you can see the reason the annual costs go up is here, 5 years after that initial investment, the authority decided, hey, let's extend our system further. And so it took out a $6 million loan over 20 years. And so you've got some increased debt repayment. And then another 5 years after that, took out another $2 million loan. And so it goes up. And you can see what that does to the rates. So what we've got here as far as what your rates would have to be is starts out at $8 per thousand, and then it gets up higher here. So higher than ideal, but it's not outside the question. And obviously this is there's all sorts of variables. So if that's too high of a rate, then we say, okay, well, that project wasn't feasible. And we look at, are there other projects or other things that we need to do? Or we couldn't expand at 5 years. We've got to wait till we have more customers till we expand further. And then this is just to give you guys an idea of, okay, if you take out a $6 million loan, what's our annual payment? So that you know what type of budget do we have to have, or have someone contributing to us in order to be able to pay for some of these larger capital costs. Put some references in the handout for you guys if you want to call. You're welcome to call any of our clients, and we'll stop there. Questions?
Wow. All right. Comments, questions for them?
I guess I'm a little confused on what the study will give us and what it will not. Can you kind of distill that for us a little bit? Where do you stop?
Yeah, as far as, I mean, like the projects you could do would be unlimited, right? And so,
Yeah, so I don't know where you stop, what the roadmap is or is not. Can you help me understand that a little better?
Yeah, so the first thing that we will do, anytime we start a new project, we want to sit down with the client and we want to say, okay, what are your objectives? And so if you say, well, just from what we know this area is probably highly likely that there will be sewer in there, so we might concentrate on that. These other areas, no one's really looking at that, but we're initially, unless you guys change the scope, we would start on those 4 areas. And my understanding is that it's the initial corridors are just the lots that are right along those roadways. And so we would say, how do we provide sewer to these parcels, whether it's homes, residential, commercial, industrial, and then if y'all would like to look outside of that, we would certainly be willing to do that. But there's a level of just our experience with, okay, you can't start a sewer system with one customer unless it's a really big customer. And so that kind of narrows it. You've got to have at least a certain customer base to even make this feasible for O&M purposes and staffing and things like that. And so I think a lot of it will just be kind of using reasonable judgment on where the projects go. I don't know if you have anything.
Yeah, let me add one thing to that. Columbia County was an example of the growth like that. And this graph was from a report that I got back in the 1990s. And I remember being asked to project into the future out to 2005. And I thought, good heavens, that 2005, we're going to be in flying cars or something by then. And so I went back, I dug this out of my files and I looked and said, well, what did the population actually do? And if you look at it, and I did this in 2016, it actually exceeded what the growth was. So in this county, when we built that facility that Greg showed you, the Little River, I think it's up here, we built the initial facility, it was 1.5 million gallons a day, and we had to build a great big 7-mile long trunk sewer to lead to it, and there was no way that our projections in the future that we could afford to build that at the time. There it is. And so this was the original plant right here, just this little piece. And the big sewer comes in here down Uchee Creek, and we needed what would eventually become 2 parallel 36-inch ductile iron sewers, a lot of money, 7 miles long. There was no way to afford it. What they could afford at the time was an 18-inch sewer, and that was it. So we put an 18-inch sewer back in the 90s, and as it grew, we paralleled a piece with a 24, we paralleled a piece with a 36, and over the years, they grew from, this is a county that was 66,000 and has grown to about 215,000 now. So we've been with them every step of the way incrementally. So I think the study period that Greg was looking at is, we mentioned 2040. Beyond 2040, you're doing a little guessing, but we do have, a lot of people that agree, okay, 2040, we've got, how many people was it?
30,000.
30,000 people. So I think that's the starting place, is say, okay, how can we accommodate 30,000 people? And then you start biting off chunks of development and say, okay, how many customers does that generate? That's how much revenue you get. And it's a balancing act where the two cross. And there's a little bit of science and there's a little bit of art to that. But it'll be a process to work out through the report.
Well, I guess one of the issues we're gonna have is starting this thing with limited knowledge and limited money, so it has to be some way to prioritize where you go first.
Let me give you an example. One of the first places you go is where you can get money from somebody else, right? So this Social Circle project is paid for by the industry and by grant money. So there is grant money that's available, and one thing I think Turnipseed can offer is, I think more than anybody else in the state, we're key to helping you figure out how to finance it. So we're pretty good. We have people that used to work at the funding agencies, used to be city administrators. And so we look at where we can spend the money. If it's a low-income neighborhood, there might be some CDBG money. If there's economic development, there might be One Georgia, EDA. There's USDA grant and loan programs, GFA. We've been successful with all of those programs. So you find places where, okay, this isn't our first choice, but we can get half of it paid for with grant money. Now it becomes our first choice. So in the report, we're going to be lining up these projects with potential funding sources.
Does that answer your question, or
Well,
is
it helps. I'm just trying to think, we gotta pick one to start with. And it might be very modest to begin with, so I'm looking for assurance that when we get done, we'll have the low-hanging fruit figured out.
And looking at the feasibility study, would, to get going, have you ever, for your municipality, ever worked out intergovernment agreements as a stopgap measure that would then turn into some permanent solution for the municipality itself?
Yeah, we certainly have. The city didn't have a sewer system on the east side of the state, and we figured out a project way to get them funded using as much grant money as possible. And in the end, they wound up with a grand total of 70 customers. That's it. That's all they had in this town. But they were able to negotiate an agreement with a city down the road and treat that sewer. We've also had city and counties where the two of them went together and had joint ownership of facilities, and were able to negotiate an agreement where you could use the grant money that was available in each of them to benefit. And in this case, the city couldn't get grant money for the water treatment plant, and the county could. So by going together, they could use the county's grant money for the city. And so we've negotiated those agreements. The downside of that is we've also been to court to help them fight about those things. So it's always.
Who'd have thought?
You know, people always say that, you know, if we could just get bigger, we could share our resources, which is true. But I also tell my kids the best form of government is a benevolent dictatorship. The problem is you can't ever find a benevolent dictator, right? So it's great saying that we bigger is better, and if we go in with our neighbor, that it's going to be better, and it will if everybody wants to play together nicely. If they don't, you have to be able to protect yourself in those agreements from what could happen in the future. So we've been to court, we've helped with those agreements, so we do have a lot of experience in that.
So, and part of, as a key component of this feasibility study, would there be some type of, would you give a roadmap of how these intergovernment agreements would look like? Or would, how would that, because obviously this is not a master planning effort. So
Right.
this is really high level, trying to understand what the big picture looks like.
Okay, so typically our recommendations would be that Spaulding County, you need to negotiate with the city of Griffin, okay? If you want to go beyond that, we can certainly do that. Where I would start is with your service delivery agreement. Your service delivery agreement expires, I didn't check to see when yours expires, but I think you don't have very good maps, and there's some disagreement over that if I recall. But I would start with the service delivery agreement, because a city and a county it's not like Home Depot and Lowe's fighting for the customers, and one gets them and the other doesn't, right? Because what you're trying to do, everybody that lives in the city of Griffin is a Spalding County citizen also. So you're two governments, elected and appointed bodies, that are there trying to figure out the best way to serve these people. Now, if you're on the edge of Griffin and there's a peachy industry there, there's a high water and sewer user and got great jobs, well, Griffin's not gonna want to give that up. You know, you wouldn't either. But then again, if there starts to get development over on the Flint River, you really think they're gonna lay water and sewer lines all the way over to the Flint River and serve those people? They're gonna say, hey, Spaulding County, y'all go take care of them. So there is a place for the city and the county, and if you can get everybody to the table, which is no guarantee, but if you can get everybody to the table and say, look, we're just trying to figure out who can serve these people best, then I think you know, usually you can make some headway with people. And there's also, now on that service delivery agreement, you've all got to sign it and agree to it, right? Or else you're in violation, and if you're in violation, nobody can get grant money and nobody So there is a little pressure to come to some sort of agreement. So if you can lay out a plan that benefits both of you, that there is some pressure for everybody to go ahead and agree to it. But that's where we would start with that agreement.
Other comments, questions?
Well, I do want you to know that we have another sewer plant in this county, Sun City, north of us.
Yeah.
But we have a potential of a private public partnership on the north side of Sun City, so that wasn't in the group, but I want you to know that
Okay,
there's a fourth plant.
I saw that in the RFQ. It's owned by a private company.
Correct. Okay, anything else? Greg, Kenny, thank you, we appreciate it, excellent job. You've answered all the questions I think we've got for you.
Thank you.
Thank you much. Anything else for the authority?
Well, are we gonna discuss our opinions after we leave?
Yep. All right, let's take a 3-minute quick break for them to get out of here and us to get ready to talk about what we saw in the presentation.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much.
Thank you.
Thank y'all, appreciate it. Oh, be careful.
No, thank you. Appreciate it.
Let's have some discussion about what everybody saw.
I felt that Gresham Smith did a much better job of addressing our specific RFQ. I think Turnip Seed understands where we want to go, but they didn't present it there as well.
Okay.
Gresham Smith talked to us. I felt better when the president of Turnip Seed was talking. I felt like he talked to us. The other young man seemed to be talking at us. That was just my perception.
Okay. This is, everybody gets an opportunity. Ms. Gwen?
Presentation is everything. I just felt like, I felt confident that, the first presenters knew that we just want the base study. And for me, it was getting into the weeds a little bit when we started talking about this is what a sewer plant could look like, 'cause we're not even there. We don't even know if we'll ever be there. So, yeah, I got warm and fuzzy with Gresham.
Okay. Jim?
I agree with Glenn. I'm more confident in Gresham Smith. I don't think Turnip Seed did what they were supposed to do.
Whoop, okay. Ms. Fanny?
Yes, after, listen, I guess I can see the Gresham Smith would be the, I say, the more comprehensive group.
Okay. All right. Wait.
I think between the two, Gresham's gonna have the deeper bench. I think they're gonna be more qualified, and I think they're gonna do a better job long term.
Okay.
I second that.
I've said it before, I think Gresham Smith's gonna be more expensive on the front end, yes I do. Do I think it's gonna pay for itself in the long end? Yes I do. The biggest mistake we can make is to pick cheap engineering. That's gonna be the most expensive mistake we can make if we do that.
Penny wise, pound foolish.
Yeah, I'm in for everybody playing. All right, city, what do you think?
I'll say the presentations were both good. Gresham, I think, I agree with everyone else's, opinion that their focus was where it needs to be right now. Turnip Seed, I think, was, presenting from their maybe typical approach with customers who are getting more of a turnkey service from them. And if you notice their vision, their objective is to establish a more long-term partnership through this initiative, not just a one-off. So, while that would be more than likely beneficial regardless of which firm you go with, I do tend to agree with the group that Gresham is, keeping their, main thing.
Okay. All right. Everybody gets to play. Charlie? No? Everybody gets to play. Yeah, we'll get to the general manager in a minute.
What about Fanny?
Yeah,
Oh, excuse me. I thought she,
I suppose my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, she did. Okay. All right.
Mr. Lucky.
Mr. Lucky.
Yep. All right. Mr. Lucky, which one did you like better?
First one.
Okay. All right. County manager?
I didn't hear all of Gresham Smith's, but the first part of theirs was very impressive.
All right. We're down to the general manager's concept.
Well, in my opinion, we had two distinctly different presentations, and I think two distinctly different approaches. If, in my opinion, Gresham Smith really focused on the intergovernmental agreement aspect, which I think will emphasize what I've heard the board talk about is not necessarily, we're currently not staffed for any sewer expansion. The thing that I'm concerned about with Turnip Seed is they're talking about these grandiose plants. Well, they wanna, now, they're looking at paying for the plant via industrial customers and grants, and it seems like would be a lot of coordination with the Industrial Development Authority, which would be good for Mr. Lucky and prospects. But we don't have a billing system. There's a lot of different things that are gonna go into this. So I think Gresham Smith nailed it, on the head in the beginning. Start developing your sewer, keep your service area, then we can talk about what the ultimate goal really is for how we want sewer to look inside Spalding County.
I wasn't sure on Turnip Seed. My question was, where we start, where we stop? I didn't get an answer to that, I didn't think.
No, you did not.
And remember, Gresham Smith said that data in the beginning to generate some type of rate analysis. But Turnip Seed, they were showing what a rate would look like. I mean, I appreciate them giving us that $8 to $15 per thousand treatment costs, which was, that's good to have in case we get asset on jeopardy. But I think
Without the supporting data, that's a useless graph.
Absolutely, but I do appreciate the fact that they did some baseline analysis and showed where some trunk lines would be and where some centralized regional wastewater plants would go. Because I think what you'll find is probably some correlation to what Gresham Smith's master plan could look like. They went in and gave us some master planning effort in this report, which I have to commend them on.
Yeah, a lot of money.
I also
Cheryl?
felt like Turnip Seed was kind of negative on the idea of package plants. They covered that very quickly and went straight to big plants.
That was one of the things I was actually liked about
To
it.
that.
I'm trying to be where we have options.
Okay.
Well, you haven't given us your opinion, did you?
I was like the county manager. I remember I missed most of Gresham. I thought theirs was, the first presenter was much better about talking about what I wanted to hear than the second one. Second one team talked a lot about the finance side of the house, how we're going to work money.
Gresham did too.
I wasn't there for that part, so it was just the first, 15 minutes at the most of that. All right. are
We're gonna have to vote on this, right?
That's what I'm getting ready to say.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we choose the Gresham Smith.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Let me tell you, this is the biggest decision we're gonna make this year. This is a huge, huge decision. So, we've
it's the
worked up,
biggest
we've worked
decision
up,
we're
we've
making
done
for
the
a while.
plan. I just wanna make sure everybody understands. This is the big time. Ms. Gwen Flowers Taylor?
Yes, I was just looking through their webpage, and they have a lot of offices. I only saw one person of color on their executive board. So I just want to be on the record
Good, thank you.
saying that, we need to make decisions, but we also need to look at organizations to see whether or not they're utilizing diversity and experience in that.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments? This is the time. Groupthink doesn't work. If you just can't go along. If you got a thought, this is the time to say something. All right?
Did we not ask them how long it would take for the study?
The RFQ, inside the RFQ, we stated that we gave a 9-month horizon, and all consultants said that everything could be done in that 9-month period.
This don't seem like such a long time.
Well, you want it done right, or you want it done quick.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying, we have this knack for jumping ahead, trying to do stuff before we got the other thing fixed out.
My thought, just my own personal thoughts are, while we're letting them doing that, and they're gonna be reaching back into us for questions and data and stuff like that, we ought to focus on the water side of the house and say, all right, we've got 9 months or so when before the sewer answer comes back. In those 9 months, let's be looking at the stuff the general manager's brought up to us a number of times on water issues. This is the time we ought to focus our attention on water while we're waiting for the sewer to come back to us.
Well, we still gotta negotiate the price and all that too, so at that time, we can slap a deadline on it.
I think in Gresham's response to your RFQ, there was 4 or 5 meetings in that period of time before you get your deliverable. So there's a good bit of coordination and investigation across the fences.
Okay.
Well,
I'm ready to get it done.
Yep, this is the government, as you know, ma'am. All right. Any other discussion on?
Mr. Chairman, I have
Yes,
a
ma'am.
question, please. When you mentioned the minority over on Gresham Smith, what did you find on the second?
Nobody.
Okay. And this question, just so everybody knows, I've asked Lynn to always bring that up so that we're aware of it, we don't forget about it. All right, this is it. All those in favor of Gresham being our choice, raise your hand. Okay, unanimous decision. All right,
All right.
motion to adjourn.
yes.
right.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
So I guess.
All right, all those in favor, raise your hand. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Joseph,
Big meeting.
why was she
This is a big
harassing you
meeting.
about the MBA? Oh, okay.
Got the one you need.
Thank you. Sir?
Oh, really?
No. There'll be more, trust me.
So you can communicate with her on a personal level too.
Thank you.
Well, I was impressed by them. Like I said, when the president of the tenure seat started talking, I felt like he was talking to me. But the presentation was kind of acting.
Just the information that they take. That's where I was.
Yeah.
She laid out the next plan.
Yeah.
IGA, IJA.
You can't read that?
Yeah.
That's the note I passed. It says swag.
Oh, God, yeah. No, they get them and they go to work in Atlanta.
Okay.
You know, there's lots more money and they're young and they're stuff.
Yeah, that's,